She's also an associate lecturer at École Nationale Supérieure d'Architecture, ENSA, Paris-Saclay, and a member of the Ancient Paris Commission. And her research is focused on Violette Leduc's work and the architectural definition of preservation restoration. The title of her paper is The Non-Human Inhabitants of Historical Monuments, the case study of La Chapelle-Gauthier Castle in Seine-et-Marne, France. But that is based on independent research, as I've understood, and not connected to her thesis. Next in the running order is Mr. Juan Duarte, who is a PhD student in art history and heritage studies at the University of Santiago de Compostela and the University of Porto in Portugal. He's also a guest lecturer at the Departement Patrimoine et Paysage Culturel, Jean Monnet University, Lyon, Saint-Étienne, France. And João has studied history of art and history of Portuguese art at the University of Porto. And the focus of his research is architecture and cultural landscape, namely the relationship of vernacular and contemporary architectures and, with the territory and landscape of the Altodoro wine region. And the title of his paper is The Paradox of Aestheticization of the Altodoro Wine Region Landscape, Vernacular Languages in Contemporary Architecture. And it's based on your PhD project. And then the third in the current running order is Menekosian, who is a research spatial analysis landscape department at the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands. Menekosian has studied Mediterranean archaeology, classical archaeology, and logic at the Vrije University in Amsterdam. And his research fields include landscape archaeology, GIS, maritime landscape GIS, urban GIS, and historical cartographical GIS. And the title of his paper is Future Wetlands, a new integrated framework for sustainable heritage management in dynamic landscapes. And it's based on a research that is conducted with his colleague, Dr. Rowan von Lanen, who is sadly not can be with us today. And last but not least, Ms. Megan Duvey, who is the scientific officer and head of research at the Conservation Départemental du Vaucluse in France. Megan Duvey has studied museology of sciences at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris and contemporary history at Paris-Diderot University, Paris-7. And Megan is specialized in management of collections, especially scientific and technical collections in museums. And the title of her paper is Managing and Thinking the Future of a Tourist Attraction Whose Identities and Uses are Numerous. The case of Fontaine de Vaucluse, based on the project Operation Grand Site, and prepared together with her colleagues Guillaume Dolo and Sandra Chastel. So now we are ready to start, and I give the floor to Bérénice Cousin.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much to the organizer of this conference. So I shall start immediately. Yes, this is the right running order. Yes. So the non-human inhabitants of historical monuments, and I will mainly focus on the case of the castle of La Chapelle-Gauthier, which was built mainly in the 17th century in a small town in Seine-et-Marne, which today has around 1,500 inhabitants, so a small town. It was protected as a historical monument in 1990, 4 years after the takeover of the municipality in 1996. The castle is nowadays partially used by the offices of the municipal administration and a library, municipal library too. Even if protected as a historical monument, this castle remained far from the mass tourism network. Its heritage anchorage remained local. In 2016, the municipality launched a diagnosis, an architectural diagnosis of this castle, because some parts were in poor condition, leading to fear of irreversible damage. The architectural diagnosis of a historical monument provides a stratified reading of the monument whose two main layers are the history and the evaluation of the sanitary condition of the building. That is to say, the identification of the chronology of the building in its materiality and the state of the different parts of the building. These two layers dictate the planning and the types of intervention in order to respond to the emergency, considering the possible disappearance of an element whose heritage value is often determined by history. For elements endowed with high heritage value, the intervention will be more delicate than in a part with low heritage value, which may undergo transformations. At La Chapelle-Gauthier, by superimposing the historical layer and the condition of the different parts of the building, a hotspot appears. It is the northeast pavilion with a fire chamber on the ground floor and decorated lounges on the first floor. A part of the castle which was not used by the municipality, and it has been not used since the 80s. So the northeast pavilion is both the oldest part of the castle, so it has an antiquity value, the least modified, so it's under with authenticity, and the most in danger. And indeed, emergency interventions were necessary because the pavilion is cracked in its northeast corner, which was slowly detaching from the rest of the castle. What makes this part heritage values, according to the usual criteria of conservation, are both its age, its authenticity, and the threat of disappearance. But what the heritage diagnosis doesn't say, it is that in this part of the castle, which has not been used by humans since the 80s, as I was mentioning before, another inhabitant has settled in particularly on the ground floor in the fire chamber. It is a beetle called Blaps mucronata in Latin, an endemic species that was thought to have disappeared in this region and which has reappeared inside the castle. The municipality was sensitive to the preservation of biodiversity with a zero feature policy, and they are next to a Natura 2000 zone, to the point that the deputy mayor didn't conceive heritage any other way than in the meeting between built and unbuilt, culture and nature. The municipality therefore called, apart from the heritage diagnosis, to an entomologist in order to identify the beetle, and the entomologist described it as follows, so I quote, "It is subservient to old cellars, old buildings, and dovecotes. It seems to feed on the dropping of birds and their desiccated corpses." And indeed, in the firing chamber, birds, mostly pigeons, had settled in this very room, where their droppings and corpses created in this closed space, not frequented by humans, a propitious environment to the settlement of this insect. There seems to be a convergence here. A fragile, rare animal, which can be endowed with heritage value, settles in the most fragile part of the building. In this case, the historic monument is a refuge for the development of biodiversity. However, it is not that simple. The heritage value of the building and the heritage value of the beetle find themselves face to face in a conflict where it is ultimately the preservation of the monument that has taken precedence over the insect. Between August and December 2018, the emergency interventions I was mentioning before in the Northeast Pavilion for the stabilization of this pavilion were completed. They consisted in the implementation of shoring at all levels of the pavilion, including the fire chamber. So that's what you see on the pictures. This construction site required the clearing of the surface of the ground, meaning the biotop of the beetle, and the trampling of that soil. As a result, the beetles disappeared. They were probably killed, and those who survived this brutal intervention probably left elsewhere. However, this has undoubtedly weakened the protected species. The former deputy mayor told me, and I quote, "After the shoring were installed, I did not meet any more beetle in the castle. They were exterminated." The insect, however heritage it may be, did not weigh heavily against the historical monument. I said earlier that the heritage value of the pavilion resides in its age, its authenticity, and its vulnerability. The beetle is also vulnerable in addition of being rare. Both the pavilion and the beetle also share a relative uselessness. The castle is obsolete from a daily point of view, difficult to maintain for a small town. The beetle, if there is no doubt that it has a role in the local ecosystem, has no direct or at least not easily perceptible utility for us human. Uselessness put them in danger, and it is this threat that places them in exceptionally regime that requires heavy investments. If historical monuments have gained this exceptionality regime, biodiversity gains it gradually. However, in the conflict between the two, it is the historical monument that wins, at least for the moment. What if, in our heritage diagnosing, the living that populate historical monument were to be considered? If the beetle could be included, I'm almost done. The beetle could be included in the layers that determines the heritage value. We would have been forced to imagine solutions that spare both the most fragile part of this venerable castle and its equally venerable inhabitant. A biodiversity value would be added to Alois Riegel's system of values, which would not be without consequences for the practice of restoration. And here I'm mainly talking about practice by architects. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Berenice. And before I leave the floor to Joao, I will let the people come in and sit down. Are there more people outside coming on their way? No. Great. Then we just let you. Well then, our next speaker is Juan Duarte. And please, Juan, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you Eva. Thank you to this wonderful organization. So the landscape of the Altodoro wine region was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2001 in the category of cultural landscape. In this context, that we use the composed term of heritage landscape to refer the act of patrimonialization of the landscape, the act of the legitimation and definition of common good based on identification of the social collective whose sharing of values, rights and duties it's implied. So today I will present the heritage landscape, the importance of the agricultural system for the maintenance of the landscape, and the influence of the tourism for the development of a new architecture. So today I will talk about wine architecture. So Altodoro wine region is in Portugal, as you see in this map, in the north of Portugal. And as I told you, in 2001, UNESCO recognized the heritage value. In this sense, Altodoro wine region landscape takes a new category, that of heritage landscape. It is in this context that if I use the heritage landscape, the act of patrimonialization of this landscape. And the consequence is the tourism development and the international recognizing driver by UNESCO. So we have a correlation between the wine and the tourism industries, and this contributes for the development of the new projects in the wine architecture area. So at the same time, this correlation between the wine and tourism industries develops in the Altodoro wine region, as I told you, for new programs. Sorry, there. New programs for a wine architecture, but we have hotels and we have a lot of typologies of this new architecture inside this region. So, but this region has a vernacular architecture in the landscape. So viticulture is an interrupted agriculture, and the construction of the landscape is directly related to the biophysical space, from the soil typology to geomorphology and relief or the climate. So wine landscapes are spaces interconnected with material and immaterial culture, with cultural heritage, built structures, vernacular or heritage architectures, village, and the intangible heritage. So wine-growing landscapes fall under the category of evolving and living cultural landscapes. They are evolutive landscapes when there are the evolutionary transformation process, both in form and composition, depending of the use of the soil. They are living landscapes, as they retain an active role in contemporary societies which inhabit and work in them with a continuous evolutionary process, like a palimpsest with the marks of the time behind manifested. So landscapes are the result of the continuous reorganization of land to adapt them to everyday uses, where coexisting material and immaterial values give them a differentiating character. Landscape exists to start due to the variation in the land employs a gradient of intensity in the use of the land, and it's a continuous transformation and improvement for agricultural practice. They are anthropogenic landscapes. So the cultivation of vineyards has played a fundamental role in the construction of landscape. Wine-growing landscapes are reorganized as a specific type of agricultural landscape, whose land use and transformation system represents all their production. They are landscapes that reflect the ancient human presence in the territory and are the result of a long process of adaptation and interaction of communities with the biophysical environment, namely with the construction of the support walls for terraces and levels, water drainage systems, housing architectures, or support for agricultural activity, among others. Soil typology, geomorphology, relief and climate and microclimate are fundamental elements in the construction of the territories and in the wine landscapes. They are landscapes interconnected with material and immaterial heritage. So the inclusion of the Altodoro wine region in the World Heritage List from UNESCO in 2001 promotes international recognition of the region, and in this way the increase in the tourism economy. The heritage landscape at the service of the business, the attribution of a globally recognized value through UNESCO contributes to the increase in revenues in the area of tourism. So, as illustrated in this graphic, there has been a profound demographic change. There is a considerable decrease in the population from the 20 years. The depopulation of rural areas and the change in the way of life in the countryside requires a change in the paradigm of analysis of cultural heritage. So Portugal has enormous potential for the development of the wine tourism. Through the national territory, there are modern and properly equipped facilities to produce wines, as well as for the offer of the other services and products related to the wine tourism. In the perspective of regional development, the paradigm of management and preservation of cultural heritage must consider people and associated uses. Altodoro wine region landscape heritage management must consider the profound changes that have taken place in the region under study. Tourism levels are growing and the population in the area is decreasing. So, what is the impact of the patrimonialization of the landscape in Altodoro wine region? So, since 2001, several contemporary wine architecture projects and of an erudite character have arisen linked to wine production. Hotels and lasers, culture and sport, production and industries, wineries. In this cause and effect relationship between the inscription of the landscape on the UNESCO World Heritage List, thank you, and the development of new contemporary architecture projects. So the architectural program of this production units presents several concerns such a relationship with the landscape, considering the topography of the land, the scale of the building, and the quality of the materials. The architectural program now fulfills a double function. One hand, it renovates and adapts to the space to the new methods of wine production, and the other hand, a circuit development for visitors to get to know the entire production process is integrated into the architectural program. So the relationship of the building with the landscape becomes essential in the analysis of the architecture in the landscape heritage, wherever the relationship with the landscape and consequently with the orography conditions, the development of the architecture program itself, in sense the orography shapes the location of the winery. So the wine industries intersects with that of tourism in the sense even with pre-existing building structures with patrimonial value. The owners motivated by the tourism industry look to contemporary architecture for a form of expansion. So, architecture has played a key role in the tourism offer in the region, not only in the residential tourism, but also in the wine tourism. The architectures present use hybrid forms in the correlation between vernacular influences and the contemporary plastic languages. Wineries use a plastic language with more geometric forms, breaking with vernacular forms, and wineries use forms and materials in the perspective of a continuity. So the materials are worked in the traditional way according to the line of continuity or not a pastiche or architectural mimicry. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan. And is there anybody else who wants to have a seat? We can go now. Otherwise, I leave the floor to Mene Kosian, who is our third speaker.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the organizing for this event. I'm Mene Kosian. I'm also speaking on behalf of my colleague Rowan van Laane, who is certainly not here today. And I will talk about managing wetland areas and wetland heritage landscapes. Wetlands are among the most highly acclaimed natural, cultural landscapes in the world. Very dynamic landscapes, but therefore also very vulnerable. And the Netherlands, and I'm from the Netherlands, is mainly based on the development of wetlands from historic times and the reclamation of people taking use of these wetlands creating a land from the sea, and therefore the wetlands are not only a natural environment, but are in Holland also very much a cultural and identifying environment. Here we have the Western Fenlands in the west of Holland area. It's all peat reclamation wetlands. Peat reclamation from the 11th century onwards, and this is very much how the Dutch see themselves, creating land from water, and this is also how people all over the world see the Dutch, making land from water with windmills. So the wetlands in the west of the Netherlands, the western area of Holland, are very much giving identity to the people who live there, not only locally, but even internationally. Another story that the Dutch always have is their struggle with water. The fight against the sea and creating land from the sea, but also small islands that have to be defended against floods. And one of these islands is the now former island of Scotland. And Scotland is now in a polder in a reclaimed area, still visible as a small hill. Well, hill is perhaps a large word, but in Holland it's a hill if it's over 5 centimeters in height. It's still visible in the landscape, and you can see the struggle of the former islanders against the sea. But now it is also an internationally acclaimed piece of Dutch engineering of reclaiming land and large-scale farms. You can see here, this is a typical Dutch picture of our fight against the sea. And it gives a completely new type of landscape. Large scale, completely designed, internationally acclaimed as typically Dutch. But these landscapes still have their problems, and there are modern challenges, of course, with climate change, flooding, regional flooding, heat stress, excess showers. There are modern principles of nature preservation and nature management, including, for instance, rewilding of certain parts of wetlands. And there are, of course, the modern-day demographic pressures requiring extra building of cities and houses and what's on. And there are also a lot of political changes in perception on how to manage landscape, how to manage land and people. But these landscapes are also our heritage, so we have our heritage values for the landscape, but also these values and our ideas, our perception on heritage is changing. Take, for instance, the Faro Convention, the European Faro Convention, who ask for an increase in participation in societal context of heritage. Also, another point is that heritage was something to be protected, some museum parts of your landscape, but there's also a trend into heritage making it less object-oriented and more thinking about heritage landscapes, including intangible heritage, including people's stories, including personal stories and personal heritage into a landscape context. So this awareness of heritage is shaping identities of local people and their reaction on their environment. And this, of course, creates a new demand in a contextualized, more storytelling heritage management. The problem is, especially in heritage landscapes, is that you have a lot of stakeholders. It's kind of a Gordian knot between several layers of government, local municipality government, national government, for a lot of these landscapes. Take, for instance, the island of Scotland, which is also UNESCO World Heritage. You have UNESCO rules, but there, of course, are also the people who live there. You have all kinds of local groups, you have local interests, you have your farmers, your economic pressure. So if you want to have a management system that can supply the needs of all these groups, you have to build something that is open, transparent, and not just from a heritage point of view. So we have tried to build such a system, and we've called it the Historical Geographic Information Science. And its main characteristics is it is GIS based, so you can link all the sources, all the interests on a geographical basis. You don't need to translate all the data sources into one big giant database where everybody is lost in some kind of hyperspace. Just say where it is and try to make a geographical tailor-made system analysis possible. The theoretical framework also highlights the role of spatial context and interrelations in historical systems, so you can make it diachronical, you can tell a story through time, and it facilitates data combination, as I said, on a very broad scale. We have built such an HGIS for the Western Finland area, and that was based on a lot of historical and modern water management information maps and water management systems. This was based also on the Dutch Water Board system, on Rijkswaterstaat, the national governmental area for water management. And we have managed to make a diachronical system showing the development of this water system and all the features in it for over 400 years. And now it is being used for a test for soil subsidence over the time. Another HGIS we've built is that of the former island of Scotland, which is UNESCO World Heritage, as I said. It's the first World Heritage in the Netherlands, and it symbolizes the heroic age-old struggle against water, but it also gives you, as a universal value, the surviving evidence of prehistoric and early historic society reclaiming this land, and the modern farming, great-scale, internationally acclaimed Dutch landscape. So there you have a conflict of interests within UNESCO universal values. So how can you manage something like that? We have built the same kind of HGIS on these kind of sources, and we can now give insight into the development of the island, the development of habitation and which people lived where and what stories are local. And that gives an insight in all kinds of management systems that you can combine in a geographical way. The next is, and that is under development now, is for the Wadden Sea, and that is not only in the Netherlands, but is a UNESCO World Nature Heritage crossing the borders of 3 countries, which makes it even more complex and therefore very interesting to make it into one management system where all the sources keep their own values.
Thank you for this presentation, Menikosian. We then move over to the last speaker in this session, Ms. Megan Duvey. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. First, I'm going to apologize because I'm going to speak in French right now.
Why apologize?
And please speak a bit louder.
Some en Frans.
Big picture.
Sure.
Okay, so hello everyone. I would like to thank you for organizing this event.
Donc pour l'organisation.
So for organizing this colloquium, which gave me the opportunity to hear fascinating interventions, and I hope that my presentation will be interesting to you as well. It is about the management of and the fact that we need to think about the future of the touristic attractions, the case of Fontaine de Vaucluse. And it is a 600 inhabitants village, welcoming thousands of visitors per year. So it is a natural attraction preserved since 1932 by the national authorities. On the slide, you can see the Fontaine Valley. So it is a wonderful place built around a valley, which is close to a cliff, which is 100-meter high cliff. It is a closed valley, narrow valley. It was done in order to embrace a broader landscape, but this landscape is suffering landscape degradation, and so it is the object of a ground site operation in order to restore the landscape quality of the place. So I would like to say a few words on the ground site policy, which was created in 1976, in which is managed by the Ministry for Culture. So it is a contract between the state and the local authorities, and the main goal is to provide an operational solutions in order to welcome properly the visitors in classified sites when they benefit from a good reputation. So I will use the acronym OGS to talk about the ground site operation. We could also talk about the Pont du Gard, Mont Saint-Michel, and Gorge du Verdon, which are also a part of this ground site operation. This policy has been implemented for years now in the Fontaine de Vaucluse area, and I would like to provide a short introduction of this site.
Are you good here, Megan? Yes. Okay, great. Here we go.
Donc le futur.
So the future ground site will be implemented around Fontaine de Vaucluse. So here you can have a global overview of what is present around the Fontaine de Vaucluse. It is surrounded by the Vaucluse hills. So what is it? It is it rises from a chasm. And it is quite a complex term to talk about the fact that it is a way to have some sort of runoff of waters down underneath the cliff, and it is 300 meters deep. So I would like to talk about the explorations which took place in the 19th century in this chasm, and because we tried to explain mysteries surrounding this area. So this source has been a place of legends, of pilgrimages, and people were fascinated by the site since the Middle Ages. I would like to tell you that it is impossible to dive into this chasm. Only scientists can do it, and only the Speleological Society of Fontaine de Vaucluse can do it. So Francois Petrarch, the pre-humanist poet, contributed to the reputation of this site. There is the Pontrapetrac Library Museum, which was created since the 19th century. This is not the right date on the slide, and it allows to create a creative and poetic links between artists and the site of Fontaine de Vaucluse. There are many representations of the site in the museum because this site inspired many artists after Petrarch. So here you can see a few pictures of the site. Those are representations that you can see at the Petrarch Museum. So this was a slide showing what kind of exploration took place. It is very deep, 300 meters deep, so it is as high as the Eiffel Tower. And in the middle of the 19th century, this Fontaine de Vaucluse area became a touristic area and also an industrial hub. In the 1970s, it was the end of the industrial past of the region, and now we see that there is more and more scientist documentations which were written since the 70s. So they would like the will to solve the issues related to the site started in 1970. In 2040, there was the ground site operation started. In order to be able to be a ground site operation, you need to be classified, you need to have a remarkable territory, you need to welcome many visitors, and you need to make sure that you want to create specific partnerships and sustainable partnerships in order to preserve the quality of this landscape. So they decided to create a ground site operation based on an action program, based on landscape studies, and they wanted to study how the site was working in order to really try to troubleshoot the issues which were identified. So the ground site operation is not limited to the Fontaine de Vaucluse area. They decided to create 46 action plans in order to restore the landscapes and enhance the possibility to access the source, to help develop the close valley in order to reach the ground site certification in the following years. And the certification can just show how sustainable the site is. The local authorities can just benefit from recommendations. They don't have to follow the recommendations. So now I would like to show you which were the main issues which were identified in the different studies. The first one is that there is a lot of traffic jams in the area, because since it is close near a valley, it is a very narrow roads leading to the site. So the different users, the pedestrians and the car users, need to share a very narrow space. Especially here you see this picture of the main square of the village, and there's not a lot of space in order for them to then leave their car and join the pedestrians in order to go see the source. There is not a lot of parking spaces, and it is clearly an issue. This solution would be to make sure that people can't park too close to the site. The second issue is the fact that there is a lot of shops around the source or in the path leading to the source, because since all the visitors have to walk by, it leads to a lot of, it generates a lot of revenues for the local merchants. So if, for example, you can see commercial stalls with using a lot of flashy colors, and it is not that beautiful to look at in the area, it is clashing with the global aesthetic. So they would like to really make a difference between the touristic path and the more industrial part of the area. Other issues were identified as well, such as the fact that it is not possible to see the Sorgue River, even if the tourists come to see it, and also the lack of signals, because there is no signage around this area, and it is quite difficult to find. So the ground site operation is here to improve the possibility to access the site, and also this project would like to propose collective action, and that's why the different territories are involved in it. For a very long time, this approach suffered from the lack of a steering committee, first with the community of Fontaine de Vaucluse, because they didn't have the backbone to do it by themselves. So It means that the Federation of Municipalities of the area had to do it. The main goal is also to give more value to the site and to also draw the attention of everyone to the global area of Fontaine Valley, because the tourists are really focusing on the chasm, even if there are so many other things to look at. And also we would like to requalify the left bank of the Sorgue, because the left bank of the Sorgue is not really visited. It is the end of a dead end, at the end of the dead end, and they would like to improve the touristic paths around it in order to nudge tourists and tell them, oh, you should go visit it. And also they should visit as well this area, because there was a real industrial past there that can be visited. And also they would like to live with people using their kayaks, because I know that people are kayaking in the area, even if people are also here to read poetry and see museums, so it could be a little clashing. So we would like to valorize the landscape, have a better landscape integration of the Whitewater Stadium to secure the space, and in order to make sure that kayakists could keep on doing it without disturbing anyone. So at the moment, it is a site which is not really aware of its potential, and there are so many different things to do. We also need to make sure that everyone's interests are met, so it can be quite challenging. It is a common territorial project which makes it possible to put resources and initiate actions on a larger territory, and everyone has its own vision of society and what they would like to see there. So we will follow each step of the project. Thank you very much.
And thank you all, 4 speakers, and to the audience so far. I think that we all want to go traveling now. We've seen all these nice places to go to, especially the Beatles, I guess. We were all very interested in meeting. You have discussed in different ways. We have various sides of nature and heritage. So how would you think, now we're going to give you the big questions here, how do you think you best to integrate nature and heritage? And also you have seen that there are conflicts in between them. So how could we best manage conflicting interests in these fields? So which one of you wants to take up that line first and go on?
Maybe I can.
Yes, please.
Yes. I think in this question, I would say, to answer this question, I would say that to find a solution for the management, and I'm basically talking on a very small scale. I'm not talking on the scale of the territory like my colleagues were. But to find a solution for the management of natural and cultural heritage in case of conflict, the first thing to do would be to develop the knowledge, meaning that to add the more layer as needed for the diagnosis of a situation, and using many tools like those that were presented mainly by Mene. And this could bring us to take in account many parameters as possible. And as I am an architect, I'm thinking that all these parameters that can be layered in the diagnosis are the basis of a design project. And so the architect expertise could help to, and of course helped by other disciplines, could try to make a synthesis of all those parameters and in the project negotiate between these parameters. And to give you a quick example, to go back on the example I was talking about, the castle of La Chapelle-Gautier, there will be a restoration in the near future, and we have a problem because there is this joinery, and as I show on the last slide, there are swallows that build their habitats on the facades, and this joinery dating from the 17th century are considered as a high heritage value. So with the bird weighing a few grams, it will certainly not measure up to the heritage value of the joinery. So there are solutions that exist, like involving intervention during the swallow migration, and also equipped the building with artificial nests, with dropping collectors, etc. That solution that exist and that are implemented in other situations. And I would say that without also legislation here in France, I'm really talking about the French situation. Without any legislation, this evolution toward a more inclusive project will maybe happen, but in a very slowly schedule. And we know that there is kind of an emergency to preserve and probably to restore also the biodiversity. So maybe my position would be to say that the care we have for historical monument could provide some skills also to preserve the biodiversity and put them on the same level.
Yes. Anybody else who wants to take up this?
Well, yeah, I agree with you, and I think one of the most important things nowadays is to recognize and to acknowledge that there are several groups working on the same area, on the same building, on the same landscape, with different ideas and different backgrounds, and that all these ideas have their values. And especially in politics, whether it's politics on a municipality scale, on a building, or on a more national scale, on a total landscape, they tend to make a choice between those groups instead of bringing them together. And if you bring them together and then see that you can benefit from all the views, then you can build on a heritage, whether it's a building or a landscape. You can build on with those new and locally carried values. And then you can combine nature and archaeology and farming, and because you can judge them equally, and that is something that should be done more, especially in policy making and in management, that you don't judge beforehand because you make a choice. I only go for ecology, I only go for heritage, I only go for economy. No, but that you combine them, and that's why the system that we've built is not making it into one giant database where everybody is lost and everybody's missing their own details, but that you can order them next to each other on the same level, and that kind of thinking of integrating different ideas, different groups in a management system is something that we all need now.
Anyone else who wants to add on this?
I'm thinking about the conflicts in the rural areas when the landscape was transformed in some official heritage. I think we have some conflicts and risks with the people who live there. Just my colleague told, it's necessary put all the people working the same language in the different areas. And for my example in the Altodoro, we have it's not a problem, but we have some risk to transform this landscape as a museum. So we can change nothing, we can change the walls, we can change the viticulture, but we need to understand the landscapes are not a museum, they are a space lived, and they need to change and adapt for the territory, for the agricultural system, and of course, the heritage is important, the territory development is important, the agricultural system is important, and it's crucial connected all the areas for development some management handbook or something like that to involve all the people of these territories.
Yes, and we also, because I think I should give the word to Megan now, but I think we want to add, before you start, Megan, we want to add the other question we had, how also to include tourism and manage tourism sustainably within this mix of managing nature and heritage. And I think I passed the word to Megan first here, so you can start and then back again. Sorry, yes. Yes, you wanted to add to what we said just now, or you want? Yeah, okay. Yeah, when you want. You can just like Megan here and have first, and then we'll open the floor.
Just to answer to the first question, as far as the ground site operation is concerned, there could be a lot of conflicting interests because it's about the landscape and the architectural heritage, about gardens. But there is a powerful steering committee, and without that, it couldn't work, and it didn't work until there was this powerful steering committee that can listen to the needs of everyone. Because if you let the cultural service, which I represent, the garden would be like only a political and trees everywhere, which is great. But there is also the kayakers who wants a greater place also. So the steering committee is there to listen to everybody and to adapt according to everyone, because it is a huge project that won't happen again in 20 years. So yeah, you have to have will is important. So having a committee that can balance everyone is great.
Does anybody want to make an input on this tourism? Shall we open for the floor for questions? Is it fine to you? Actually, we seem to have some questions. Just then. Yes, and first, and then if there are other questions from the audience.
I couldn't listen your some consideration. First of all, from the methodological point of view, Qatar is an example of how to solve some information for your plan. Second, Wachau in Austria, where you cooperate in the Interreg program, is able also to offer an example to support your point of view. I thank your example because definitely with the HGIS, you offer a way to modelize practically the capability to understand the different interests and, as you underline, how to help people to understand to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Okay. From another point of view, exists an environmental quality management system made by the European Union in order to help to understand, to offer the people concretely tools to measure what means the impact on the territory related to cultural heritage management, for tourism, and so on and so on. So definitely also for governance, that is a very strong point. There is solution like living labs methodology helping too. My question is how to mobilize the immaterial cultural heritage in this place in order to create a future vision that brings people together. Because what is physical is we are able to measure the impact of a climate change, but in the mind of people coming from the way of thinking of cultural heritage is most complicated. Then how these resources can be used in order to support your view for the future related to sustainability and resilience of cultural heritage.
Who wants to pick up that question?
Well, I can try to make a start on that. Especially now with the Faro Convention in Europe, I think for all management and political ideas on heritage, you have to start with the local people. And I think that we have to think also that heritage is not some academic concept of things put in a museum, but heritage is something that is developed by people using their surroundings. And you have to also always ask those people, the local inhabitants, what is heritage for you? What makes your surroundings, your landscape, your city? What makes your identity in your direct surroundings? And if you ask that, just simply ask that, what links them to their terroir. Then you get answers that you can make policies tailor-made on a special area, on a special location, on a special building, including the ideas of the people. And then they can say, we think it's very important to have this and this and this included in the plans.
May I?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
For me, it was better in speaking Portuguese, but I will try explain me in English. So about the intangible heritage, I talk with this case study about this concrete landscape. I think we cannot separate the intangible heritage and the material heritage. So because we have un savoir-faire pour oh mon Dieu. Maintenant, je change tout. We have a savoir-faire connected with the terroir, the land, the people, the culture, the heritage, the built heritage, but the way the people construct the day after, the day to day, and so I think all the heritage was connected, was linked with this landscape, and I think it's there in the Altodoro wine region, but I think it's most of all the landscape heritage, they have a connection really profound between the cultural heritage, the material heritage, and the intangible. And for me, I think everything it's cultural heritage. I not separate both. I don't separate the intangible and the material heritage in this context.
Yeah, well, you can't separate it, but it's in my case in the project. There is a lack of awareness regarding the natural heritage. So, first of all, you have to raise awareness about this heritage so they know where they are, to understand all the stakes in place, and then maybe you can help them understand the place by putting centers of interpretation, like we call them, so they can respect the site and be respectful towards it and understand better their place in the natural sites, and help preserve it. That's my response.
Thank you. You want to add something? No. I'm afraid that our time is up here. I see that they are away. There was a question. You had a question? No. Because I think actually we are actually a bit over time, and I think they are waving for us here. So, but the authors are here. And I think we will end this session by giving our four speakers a big applause. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming and listening. And I'm sorry for not having more time for questions, but you see the four people, they are around here. So please catch up with them and ask more questions. And thank you so much. Thank you, Eva. Good work.
Thank you, Eva.
I was very interested by the historical GIS. Just wondering how you connect the tools to the political
questions in the chat.
Thank you.
I know that people are very
I should also say that, should I say here that they have good references in the chat. So good, yeah. They are sending a
séminaires à l'EHESS avec Cyril, etc.